Newsweek has revealed that in 1998, Donald Trump's former company, Trump Hotels, broke the U.S. embargo against Cuba mere months before he explored his first attempt at a presidential campaign. India claims that they struck a bloody blow against suspected terrorists in Pakistan, and the latest creature close to being endangered is definitely going to sting. This is The Loop. Writer Kurt Eichenwald broke the story Thursday morning in Newsweek that in 1998, with Donald Trump's knowledge, his company Trump Hotels spent thousands of dollars on an illegal trip to Cuba to explore potential business opportunities while the country was still under a strict embargo by the US government. At the time, Cuba was still under the communist rule of Fidel Castro, and in order for any company to spend money in the island nation, they had to receive government approval, which was granted for a very small number of reasons, largely humanitarian charity work. Trump Hotels did not apply for nor receive any approval from the Office of Foreign Assets Control, but internal company documents show that the company laundered $68,000 through an outside consulting firm called Seven Arrows Investment and Development Corporation, who acted as an intermediary, spending their own money to send Trump Hotels executives to Cuba, then receiving reimbursement for those expenses from Trump Hotels. Seven Arrows then instructed the company on how to make the expenses appear legitimate by connecting them to a charitable organization. According to a former Trump Hotels executive, Donald Trump participated in discussions about the Cuba trip before it happened and was aware that it had occurred. Now, according to the Newsweek story, on February 8, 1999, months after the consultants traveled to the island, Seven Arrows submitted a bill to Trump Hotels for the $68,551.88 it had, quote, incurred prior to and including a trip to Cuba on behalf of Trump Hotels. The bill was delivered to John Burke, then the corporate treasurer of Trump Hotels. In a lawsuit on a separate issue, Burke testified on the record that Trump Hotels did in fact pay the amount in full to Seven Arrows, though he claimed that he did not recognize the document when it was presented to him. Months after the bill was delivered to Trump Hotels in Miami, Florida in November of 1999, Donald Trump launched his first presidential campaign as a candidate of the Reform Party at a luncheon put on by the Cuban American National Foundation. There, to an audience of Cuban exiles, he said the following: "As you know, and the people in this room know better than anyone, putting money and investing money in Cuba right now doesn't go to the people of Cuba. It goes to Fidel Castro. He's a murderer. He's a killer. He's a bad guy in every respect, and frankly, the embargo must stand if for no other reason than if it does stand, he will come down." Shortly after the article was published on Newsweek.com on Thursday, Trump's campaign manager Kellyanne Conway responded to the allegations on The View. She said, quote, "They paid money, as I understand, in 1998, but said that Trump had never invested in Cuba." Eichenwald describes her response thusly: "In that statement, Conway has acknowledged that Trump broke the law, paying the money for the business trip and meetings in Cuba, regardless of whether it resulted in an additional investment or casino deal, would directly violate the law." He goes on to say that though Trump and his former company did knowingly break the law, the statute of limitations on the crime ran out years ago and prosecution is highly unlikely. The Indian military is claiming that it carried out, quote, surgical strikes against suspected militants along its border with Pakistan in Kashmir, a claim which the Pakistani government has denied. Instead, they're claiming that 2 Pakistani soldiers were killed in unprovoked shelling across the border and that, quote, the notion of surgical strikes linked to alleged terrorist bases is an illusion being deliberately generated by India to create false effects. The two nations have been fighting over ownership of the Kashmir territory for nearly 70 years, but the region is back on high alert after a militant attack on an Indian army base earlier in September led to the deaths of 18 Indian soldiers. At a press conference, Indian officials said that the attack on Pakistan was specifically targeting terrorists who, quote, were planning to infiltrate our territory. Lieutenant General Ranbir Singh, India's Director General of Military Operations, also called out Pakistan for their inability to contain terrorist activity within their borders. In a statement, the Indian government said that they had credible intelligence that terrorists had positioned themselves along the border and that the surgical strikes caused, quote, significant damage to the terrorists. However, the statement did not say whether or not Indian soldiers crossed the line of conflict into Pakistan during the engagement, an act that would seriously escalate tensions between the neighboring nations, which both have nuclear weapons at their disposal. The Pakistani government says that India's actions are a direct attempt to distract the global community from human rights abuses in Kashmir. According to the BBC, more than 80 people, nearly all anti-government protesters, have died in more than 2 months of violence against Indian rule. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has proposed that a species of bumblebee should be considered an endangered species. This would be the first species of bee to be given federal protection in the United States. The so-called Rusty Patched Bumble Bee, identified by a small rusty patch on the middle of their abdomen, used to be found across the entire North American East Coast and even stretched deep deep into the Midwest. However, according to the Fish and Wildlife Service, the species has been wiped out so disastrously that it can only be found in 8% of the territory that it used to occupy. According to Seeker.com, the species' recent decline and that of other closely related bumblebees was likely initiated by the spread of pathogens from commercial bees, which are raised and sold to pollinate greenhouse tomatoes and other crops, into the wild population. The Xerxes Society for Invertebrate Conservation says that other threats include the use of neonicotinoid insecticides, which have been named as the cause of the decline in other species of bees. The society also goes on to say that the Rusty Patched Bumble Bee is a vital pollinator of the United States, pollinating wildflowers, alfalfa, apples, blueberries, and cranberries, among other crops. According to Rebecca Riley, a senior attorney with the Natural Resources Defense Council, quote, "This decision comes not a moment too soon." Now I want to hear from you. How do you feel about Donald Trump and Trump Hotels crimes in the late 90s? How do you feel about the aggression in Kashmir? And how do you feel about the endangerment of the bumblebee? Let me know down in the comments below. Like this video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, I'm Matt Lieberman, and you're in the loop. Thanks for watching. On the video, you can hear one of the officers in the helicopter say that Crutcher looks like a, quote, bad dude. At this point, all we have is Shelby's testimony, which is contested by Crutcher's family's attorneys.
Nope, nope, no. Wiener on a cutting board. How about you?